Joe Mullings from 160 Studios in Delray Beach, and today I've got two guests from MDIC and NEST. And so Pamela Goldberg, who is the president and CEO of MDIC, she's joining us from Massachusetts today. Good morning, Pamela.
Good morning, Joe. It's good to be here.
It's great to have you. And also joining us is Sandy Siami. Sandy is Senior Vice President of NEST, and she's also in Massachusetts. So continue to have Massachusetts represented in MedTech again. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing the story about MDIC and in particular NEST. So Pamela, NEST, what is NEST? Please share with our viewers the intention of it and how it fits into the MDIC mission.
So MDIC, the Medical Device Innovation Consortium, was created as a place to solve problems that aren't easily solved by either industry and FDA, where the two can come together to solve problems. And as the importance of real-world evidence has grown for every industry, but especially the medical device industry, the National Evaluation System for Health Technology, NEST, was created in order to figure out ways to use real-world evidence on behalf of the medical device industry. And so NEST is just a couple of years old. MDIC is 8 years old.
And the MDIC NEST relationship, and Sandy, you head up the NEST on the ground. Been there for a few months now, came from industry. Take me down to a micro level. What is that daily mission for you with NEST in particular, and how does it affect me, the medical device entrepreneur, if you will, or the large cap company president?
Sure, excellent question. So simply put, NEST serves actually three different purposes. One is to further research in the total product life cycle of a medical device, from first in man all the way through post-market surveillance and sunset of a particular device, where we also have an active surveillance initiative to really use real-world data to better identify and more quickly identify potential safety signals. Are they real? And then the collaborative community of what's important in real world data, in medical devices, and furthering what we can do with it. And so, initially NEST was developed because traditional clinical trials are costly, they're time consuming, our healthcare system is fragmented, and we needed to find an efficient way to be able to execute studies using real world data to get faster, better, cheaper on the medical devices for the end user, the patient. And that's the important thing, is we're doing all of this to enable and empower the end user, which is the patient.
I've heard the word over the last few years, real world evidence and real world data referred to many times in different contexts. Help our viewers to understand in context of NEST, what does real world data or real world evidence mean?
Sure. Real world data are the actual sources of data that is used to generate the evidence. So real world data can be information from electronic health records or it's electronic medical records. It could be claims data, whether it's Medicare claims or from commercial insurance. It could be from patient registries. We have genomics data that we're dealing with, billing data, pharmacy data, lab data. All of that comes together to generate the evidence that's required. And the important thing is, when we talk about real world data, it can be messy. It can be messy and it can be dirty. So how high quality is our evidence going to be? And again, that's the importance of NEST, to be able to provide that direction, develop and promote those standards for research methods and data quality for the various types of uses that we're going to have, whether it's for a regulatory submission or regulatory decision making, for payer or coverage decisions, or just clinical decision making.
Pamela, why is the FDA so interested in the NEST initiatives? What does it mean to the FDA? What does it mean to the manufacturers? And probably most important, what does it mean to the patient?
So I believe that the FDA is interested on behalf of industry. I think that they have heard from industry how challenging the clinical trial process is, and it takes a lot of time, it costs a lot of money. And if we can use real world data, whether it's for label expansion or a PMA or a 510K, it would expedite the process. And the real challenge is there's lots of data out there, some of which is better than others. And one of the benefits of NEST is that we've created a quality framework and a methods framework, such that the method that you use to pull together data, the quality of that data is going to be qualified in a way that hasn't been historically. And that will make a real difference in a company's ability to come to market more productively, more efficiently, and with better data to make sure that safe and effective is as safe and effective as possible.
So Pamela, on that same subject, NDIC is the first ever public and private partnership meant to move medical devices forward from a regulatory perspective. And so that means payers, it means manufacturers, it means hospitals. There's a number of stakeholders in this. How are you pulling this off? Because invariably, if I'm J&J and I'm Medtronic and I'm sharing data, arguably I could be empowering a rival with their efforts, right? If I'm looking at that from our real world evidence, real world data perspective. How are you, as the leader of this organization, MDIC, and also NEST, making that happen?
So, and I think that's a great question, and companies should be concerned about protecting their data. But the reality is that we're sourcing most of the data from healthcare systems, from payers, and all of that is kept confidential during the process. We have created firewalls and pathways to protect that data from it. And so the principal investigator will have access to the data, the company will have access to the data, but other people will not. And so that information will remain protected during the process. But one of the differences, in addition to the quality and methods that I referenced earlier, is that we aggregate data from a variety of sources and then qualify it to be able to make it credible for FDA purposes.
So data, as you just pointed out, is not always data. You know, there's been some pushback, especially in the algorithm world, of retrospective data, the cleanliness and appropriateness and contextual around that data. So you've got a process in-house to make sure that retrospectively, as we look at data, may bring the same value or more than a prospective approach on data.
Well, I think there's a place for each. I don't know, Sandy, do you want to jump in? I'm sure you have an opinion on this.
Sure. I always have an opinion. When we talk about real world data and generating that real world evidence, it's using that real world data that's fit for purpose. And so that's a buzzword you'll hear frequently when we're talking about real world data. And so this is why these frameworks are so important, because we need to provide that quality evidence. And what the level of quality I might need and the cadence I might need for a pre-market submission is going to be different than what I might need for post-market surveillance or even coverage decision making. And so it's being able to classify, or even, if I can use the word, to certify, we're not there yet, but to be able to certify the data that's fit for use in various types of submission. And this is what makes this so exciting, right? We're getting in to be able to use the data that we're already collecting, reducing burden on traditional clinical sites, but yet being able to keep up with medical device and the technology and the revisions and the innovation, and being innovative along the way.
So take me down the road with a potential scenario here. I'm coming up with a new catheter-based stroke technology, and it's arguable to say that stroke is one of the toughest clinical trials to drive forward based upon a number of factors. Why am I going to come to you? What can NEST specifically do for me? How will it influence my trial design potentially? And then finally, maybe most important, how does it shorten my time to market? So let's talk about that. I'm a CEO, I'm sitting here, I'm watching this, and I'm unaware of NEST. So where does that fit into me potentially saving my venture people money, really more importantly, getting a product to market, taking care of a patient?
So even as, excuse me, even as early as the first in man stage, real world data can play a role. There's specific prospective data that we have to collect because it's not on the market yet, but you can supplement that information with the real world data. And even designing your study for that first in man, you can use the real world data that's already available to help identify better the patient population that you need to concentrate on, at least initially, identify the appropriate outcomes that you're looking for, and how you would collect that, and what is the current standard of care. So that as you move through the total product life cycle, as you move through the different stages of pre-market trials that you're conducting, you can include more real world data to inform what you're doing. And so what that means to potential companies using this is that we should be able to get the information faster than you would in a clinical trial, in that completely prospective setting, and get more data so that when the device gets approved for commercialization, we have a pretty good idea what that risk benefit profile is going to look like, as opposed to finding out 5 years down the line during post-market surveillance. And that's the key here.
So that's where you may step in and help me either in IDE PMA pursuit or some post-market or even coverage decision-making that is occurring today, and some of the biggest challenges with some of the devices coming out.
And I can't stress the coverage piece, right? I mean, typically in the medical device industry, we wait until we have our pivotal study and then think about coverage and the national coverage decision, if it's required, or coverage with evidence development. And to think about that earlier in the life cycle is going to be quite beneficial, and socializing the concept and the framework of how you're going to execute your clinical trials or your research for marketing approval. We can help socialize that early with the right reviewers.
So Pamela, the NEST organization, I believe, started in September of 2016, if I'm not mistaken. And so we're 4 years, happy birthday, by the way, 4 years over in the game right now. What were the initial challenges and what are your current challenges in regards to NEST in particular?
Thank you. So we really started out trying to figure out what NEST could or should be. And there were some guidelines as part of the MDUFA negotiations. And so we initially wanted to bring key stakeholders to the table as members of our governing committee. We followed that by bringing together what we call network collaborators, which are healthcare systems and other data sources to bring together, aggregate the best quality and broadest range of data sources to the table. And then we had to solicit industry and say, what kinds of studies would you like to do? And we started with just a few, but we wanted to have a broad range of therapeutic areas. And we wanted to have a mix of pre-market and post-market. We wanted to have 510Ks and PMAs, label expansion. So to be able to accomplish all of that, we ended up with launching 21 different test cases to be able to prove this model. And frankly, all the contracting with the healthcare systems and with the companies took a lot longer than intended. And anyone who's listening to this today will probably laugh because contracting always takes longer than you expect. But the good news is that at the beginning of 2020, we completed the launch of the last of the test cases. And at this point, we have 5 of them completed. By the end of the year, we should have 7 or 8 completed. And during the course of next year, we will have the balance of those proof points. But we're in the midst of doing a landscape analysis of the value of real-world evidence by an independent third party. That same third party will evaluate each and every one of those test cases to prove what benefit they can provide to the marketplace. We recently had a public forum about 6 weeks ago where we did talk about each of the completed test cases, where NEST has been over its first couple of years of life and where we intend to go with it. And so that is available on our website for anyone who's interested in learning more about and really get into the weeds of what we did. And for each one of those test cases, we had a representative from industry, a representative from the healthcare system, also in industry, healthcare system, FDA, and of course, a member of our NEST team was also part of that conversation. So it was a robust discussion about each one of the learnings that we've had from those test cases. And not everything was smooth sailing. We are definitely learning as we go, and that's going to be critical to future efficiency and ability to do this work in a very productive way on behalf of industry.
So the question is for both of you. Sandy, I'll start with you first, since you are, down in the weeds every day. And Pamela, I want to come back to you on the back end. This is a baby still, right? NEST is still a baby. If we think about this from an incubator perspective, it's only a few years old. There are gaps in any organization when it first starts out, yet you're here to serve the payers, the healthcare industry, the manufacturers, the patients, the FDA. What are the gaps right now that the large cap players can lean in on? Because those are the 100,000 sets of eyes who watch me every day. What can the manufacturers do right now to help NEST, to help them? Sandy first.
Sure. Well, certainly getting their expertise in what's really important to them for us to help solve that problem. NEST itself certainly has gaps as we expand our research network to get different types of data and how we're able to use that data. And so really it's just important to understand how they're currently thinking of using real world data, but I also see that as an education process as we talk to the CEOs, to the CMOs of these medical device industry, and socializing the use of real world data and getting in earlier on in that process for the life cycle. Real world data should not be an afterthought. As you're planning your product, we need to be in right there on the ground floor.
So if I'm running a large trial on a product right now, and let's just go, I'm leading a trial on a cardiovascular product for Medtronic and structural heart, and I'm driving that. And should the reg side of that, should the clin side of that, should the project manager side of that reach out and say, I want to help the industry and I've got some RWE, RWD coming out. What does that look like?
From the manufacturer, from the
Yeah.
industry point perspective?
Yeah.
Well, certainly the data that they collect is going to help better inform the field itself and the technology itself, because there will be next iteration of devices that there's second and third generation kind of devices as we learn more information. It's not necessarily bringing the data itself on board, because we actually have access to that data through the networks, right? But it's learning what that next step is and informing the next generation of that device, informing the innovation, informing the effectiveness and safety, and any resulting kind of modifications that need to be made based on that.
And economically on the back end of that, and let's keep it multi-generational or iteration within, let's call it Medtronic structural program. That benefits Medtronic downstream, but how does it inform potential competitors?
Certainly being the first one out, you're paving the way for others to kind of follow suit, because you've set that example.
Which happens anyway, with or
Which
without
happens
Nest.
anyway,
Right.
exactly. That happens without Nest. But the important piece here is, as Medtronic is building, for example, using this example, its structural heart program, the active surveillance and being able to detect any signals that might come from any devices, whether it's a class effect that we're looking at or whether it's a particular device that we're looking at, that's going to help inform the entire industry, not just one manufacturer.
Pamela, what are the future expectations of Nest? Current programs, future programs you're kicking off, what should the industry be aware of as you and Sandy lead the way?
So as you mentioned earlier, that Nest is still in its early stages. We test cases aren't the same as live cases for the future of the industry. So as of June, we opened our doors to companies that want to hire us to do their real-world evidence studies for them. And we are in the midst of expanding our network of collaborators to expand the array of types of data and the range of data. So at this point, we have roughly the equivalent of 150 million patient data sources, and from a variety of geographies, including international. And so we want people to come to the table and use our services. And I think that the more people that come to the table, the greater will be the benefit for both industry and the FDA. And the fact that we have these quality standards and method standards in place really make a difference with FDA's ability to trust the data as well, that anyone can bring data, but we all know that there's good quality and there's not so good quality. And so that's going to be our seal of approval, if you will, that this data can be trusted and can be used, and the reviewers, we're working with the FDA reviewers to help them get acclimated to the whole concept of using real-world evidence as opposed to the classical clinical trials. And so at some point, we'll have a formula for what is the combination of classic clinical trials and real-world evidence that can be used to bring a product to market.
So this is my reading between the lines, and you can either confirm or pass on it. But if somebody's working closely with Nest, and Nest has obviously got a very diligent quality control as it applies to real-world evidence and real-world data, it's empowered by the FDA in order to expedite, not compromise, but expedite the process. And I'm running my clinical trials informed as a partner with Nest. That probably won't hurt me, will it?
Absolutely not. It should help you. And I think that in conversations that companies have with the FDA while they're going through the clinical trial process, I believe that those companies will, when they say, oh, and we're doing this real world evidence study with NEST, will just further validate their efforts.
Awesome. And then Sandy, finally, you are the architect with Pamela, but you're on site every day, and you're building an amazing team. You had shared with me, and Pamela had shared with me, the audacious goals of NEST and the org chart itself. And I know in 2020 we brought on 12 people already, and a big applause to you and the team there for doing that in the environment we're in. What does the organization look like, headcount? If somebody's interested in reaching out to you and joining the NEST team and making a difference and raising the boat for everybody in healthcare, tell me what you've got over the next 12 months on hand for building out your team, and what superpowers are you looking for, and who should they reach out to do so?
Well, so we purposely have a phased approach for building our team, right? So the size is looking to double within the next 6 months or so, and quite frankly, triple by the end of the year. So very aggressive goals. But certainly the analytics, we want folks that are innovative in their thinking and are able to think outside the box, not how we used to do things, but how can we do things. So analysts, research scientists, data scientists are going to be key in this aspect. And as we further build out active surveillance, we're certainly looking for IT cloud architects and compliance, ensuring we've got the right security and compliance, because cybersecurity, again, is not just a NEST issue. NESTcc has a whole cybersecurity program too. And so that's the type of people that we're looking to expand, the appropriate project managers for our research studies, and that sort of clinical background. Real world evidence is obviously a plus, but a little harder to find in that environment. But we are definitely looking to grow both for our research and the safety side of things.
Pamela, is there anything before I head out that I should have asked you that our audience should know about?
Well, as Sandy was making her remarks, I wanted to underscore the fact that where NEST is part of NESTcc, and NESTcc was created focusing on regulatory science, and we've expanded to include health economics and patient value, looking at the payer side of things. And we're looking at real world evidence in the realm of diagnostics. We're looking at real world evidence from the payer perspective. And so there are so many synergies between the work that NEST is doing and other areas of our operation, that if people are interested in real world evidence, that there are all these points of intersection within our organization and within our various activities that will benefit industry.
Well, I appreciate both your time today from beautiful Massachusetts. By the way, any more snow up there? Right.
Thankfully not. No, we've had 70-degree weather for several days, and that's pretty unusual here in November, and we'll take it.
All day long, all day long. Well, Pamela, Sandy, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I truly appreciate it. And anybody interested in finding out more about NESTcc and NEST, please check out at the bottom of the screen here, the URLs and the contact info, and certainly reach out. Fantastic organization, and doing amazing things on behalf of the industry. So Pamela, thank you. Sandy, thank you so much.
Joe, thank you. We enjoyed our conversation.
Always. This is Joe Mullings from 160 Studios in Delray Beach. Be well.